You're listening to the NCF&B podcast, part of the OG Podcast Network. The NCF&B podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFBpod. This episode sponsored in part by Food Scene. That's foodseen.com. Providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. And now, enjoy the show.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the NCF&B podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
No, Max. Bonjour et bienvenue, le NCF&B podcast.
Oh, oui, oui.
Avec Matthew Weiss et mes invités, Felicia and Max Trujillo. All right, that's about it.
Merci, merci.
That's about it. No, let's get back to English. Of course, I'm your co-host, Matthew Weiss, but we are changing things up a little bit today, as I said in French, if you guys don't parlez-vous. We are having Max and Felicia on as guests to tell us what it was like for their huge voyage to France for, was it 3 weeks, 22 days? How long was it exactly?
25 days.
25 days.
Let's call it a month.
Let's call it a month, yeah. I like to be exact. I'm very particular in those things.
I like to be hyperbolic.
25 and a half
true.
days.
25 and a half days, 6 hours and 32 minutes and 17 seconds. No, all right. So you guys went to France for 25 days. And let's start in the beginning. Why France?
Well, truth be told, our daughter actually had asked if we could take her to Paris last year, and we kind of laughed at that. But all little girls' books, reference Paris and the Eiffel Tower. And as we approached
Was that Charlotte or?
It was Alexandra.
It was Alexandra.
Our 8-year-old.
Yeah. So as we approached kind of planning for the summer, and as parents tend to do, they obsess over summer camps and everything, like in January. And we had this conversation that, maybe we should kind of think differently about our summer plans rather than spending a fortune on summer camps and sending the kids off, first thing in the morning for the rest of the day. Maybe we should do something that was a little bit more adventurous that the entire family could benefit from.
Yeah, it ended up being essentially the same amount of money we would have spent had we just put them in camps all summer long.
Right.
But we got to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to go to France.
Travel. So you figured out, okay, we're going to go travel instead of going to summer camp. And then it was France because literally Alexandra said Paris. And you
That
guys were
kind
like,
of started
all right.
that, and Max
Yeah.
had been wanting to.
And just because now taking it more like in a professional sense with the podcast, and also, and for listeners that are new to the show, Felicia, my wife, is also the owner president of Food Scene, which has been our original sponsor, longest lasting sponsor. And Food Scene does food photography and social media marketing, web design, video, and so all these things are really great for her business to go out and see a new part of the world to kind of enhance the business. And we thought, well, if we're going to do this, we should probably, and we do a food and beverage show, we should probably go to the place that's the most indicative of food and beverage and like the birthplace, if you will.
Yeah.
And so it just made sense. And there's not one city that really defines it all in France. So we just said, screw it, let's go to all of them.
Right.
All the big ones, all the best ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was, you could fly into Paris. It's a crazy city. You're there for a few days and come back. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to have an experience. And once we started talking about France and the wine regions and the food and the nuances of different regions, we knew this had to be a longer trip if we really wanted to have something to take away from it.
Okay. So food and beverage wise, your guys really, I assume, looking at this is like, what region, what towns do you want to go eat? What wineries do you want to go visit? That kind of thing. So what were like the pinpoint areas? Like, okay, I'm not going to France and without going to Lyon or Paris, or what were the cities that were definite?
I think, Felicia kind of posed that to me. She's like, well, being like a wine guy, where you want to go more specifically. Funny, the first place that I said that was a must and we have to go, we didn't go.
Which was Champagne?
Was Champagne.
Yeah.
I actually pulled out. It was my thought.
Are we talking about last night, or?
Clearly we didn't pull out.
Do we have
brought
Sarah
kids.
Weiss here in the room?
Yeah. It mainly was just for geography reasons and time travel, like while we were on the road.
Totally get it. I've done 3 whirlwind tours of France, and each time Champagne has just been left out.
It's
really?
close to Paris, but it's slightly out of the way of everything else.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's like, for those that don't know, I mean, Paris is centrally located in France. It's basically right in the center. And so Champagne is about an hour northeast. And so, but if you just go directly east, you can go to Chablis, maybe a little southeast. But basically, you head that way. And then once you're there, now you're kind of on the trail, because then you get into Burgundy, and then Rhone, Northern Rhone, Southern Rhone, Provence, and all that. And that's essentially how our trip got started. So as you know me, Matt, I love Chablis. I'm not a big Chardonnay fan, but if you're going to drink Chardonnay, we both agreed Chablis is probably the best place to get started. For those that don't know, it's all Chardonnay in Chablis. Basically, it centered around wine travel, and then we started thinking about specifics, and also because we had the kids, it's like, okay, it can't just be winery after winery. They'll kill us after doing that.
Sure.
So, and then Felicia was doing a ton of research. I think she and Rick Steves became best friends.
Who's Rick Steves?
He's a travel guide, and he has shows and books, and
Oh, okay.
You can
he's
watch
been
all
around
his stuff
for,
on
30
YouTube,
years.
and he's a
Okay.
total nerd. He's like the Huell Hauser of international travel.
Yeah. All right. So what you say makes sense for most wine people. I think that's probably the way you usually do it, unless you're going to start in Bordeaux and go the other way, which is a whole other. That's for next trip. So, all right. So you start out in Paris. So what's it like when you first get there in terms of like, what was the first restaurant you went to, and what did the menus look like?
Well, we were staying near the Eiffel Tower, and it's a really cool area because there's lots of really great boutiques and shops, and there's some Michelin-starred restaurants, but there's also a lot of touristy places. And, you know, we had literally been up for 24 hours between travel and time change, and so we dropped off our bags and went to find food, and we found a little brasserie nearby to get everybody fed.
Yeah, and that was like, because I'm leading you into the differences of cultural, like, times and schedule changes, and then also
We were fortunate enough that
it was
at
dinner
that time it was lunch. No, it was lunchtime.
Yeah.
I think we got there. It was like
1
o'clock.
Oh, perfect.
Thank
So
God.
it worked out well. And, you know, our littlest one, Charlotte, is super picky about what she likes. She loves bread and cheese, which good,
Hey,
And eggs.
you're in the right
be.
country.
And eggs.
And eggs. So yeah, so she had eggs and mayo as her lunch, and she loved it. And so it's funny though, you can get really disillusioned by the French cuisine, I think, because everyone's expectations of France is extremely high, and you know, the big shoes to fill. They say that they're the culinary leaders of the world. If you don't know where you're going and you get stuck at going to like touristy areas,
Or you're hungry and you're like, we need to pick something now.
you're going to end up being very disappointed, because there are a lot of shitty restaurants in
Sure.
France, and you've been a lot, and you probably know too. It's like, don't go to restaurants that are right next to the Eiffel Tower. Don't go to ones right next to the Arc de Triomphe. And
What was your first memorable meal?
La Garance,
Yeah.
which was a Michelin-starred restaurant.
Okay.
for one, they were awesome to the kids. They gave them multi-courses, and it was we just let them know kind of Charlotte's thing, what she likes to eat and not eat. They're like, sure, fine. So she had bread, she had eggs. They would bring cheese and like fries and all these different things. So she had like multi-courses of kids' food.
Nice.
Alexandra pretty much eats anything, so she was on board for what we had. And
There was an amuse-bouche, and there was some white asparagus. There was a veal entree.
yeah, and it was cool too because they actually
Desserts.
brought out the veal uncooked, but like a huge side of veal just in the dining room, just to like kind of show everyone. They're just like walking around. This
I think
is
to gauge
the veal.
people's reactions, because some people are like, no, and other people are like, ooh.
Yeah.
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 That's something different. You wouldn't normally see that. I mean, some
Yeah.
Michelin star places, they'll bring you out like a fish before they'll fillet it or something like that. But yeah, not usually a whole animal or a whole side of beef.
Yeah.
What are some of the other differences? Like, for example, bread service is different. Sometimes water service can be different. The menu looks even different. Like, it's not always what we think of appetizer, entree, and dessert.
Because entrees are appetizers.
Right.
Yeah, it's entree and then plates,
Yeah.
and plates are the entrees in the way we look at it. But yeah, bread service, bread just doesn't come to the table. You either ask for it or they
Well, I
bring
thought
you
bread
a
came
piece.
to the table all the time.
Well, at the lower end places, but at the nice places, it was all like, you know, French service, like tongs doling out a piece at a time, and really good stuff. But That's the other thing we said, is that bread, it didn't matter where you got your bread. You could be at a gas station, which are all really nice for food, or it could be at a Michelin-star restaurant. All the bread was almost exactly the same and all really, really fucking good.
Yeah. So all right, well, let's go down that road. So that was one of my questions is, obviously the bread lives up to all the hype that people have talked about. I mean, I know you guys have been there before, but maybe not of the same. It was, 15 years ago, 20 years ago since you were last?
I think it had been
15.
14
France.
or 15. Yeah.
Yeah, so you might have not been the same foodies or had the same
No.
palate back then or had the same means
Most
to travel.
definitely not.
No, but I mean, we knew too. I mean, I went to a little market in the morning in France, or in Paris, for some croissants, and they were amazing. And then I had a croissant somewhere else, and it wasn't as good. And then I realized that place, I was like doing more research on it, they had won like an international award as the best croissant in Paris or in France or something like that. And they had trophies all around. So I went, oh, I guess I picked right. Like,
Nice.
This is the best croissant.
I think the desserts across the board, I don't think I had a bad dessert. The desserts, the pastries across the board,
Yeah.
no matter where we were exceptional.
So, did you give any insight into my ongoing question or crusade for why the tangible, definite reasons why the bread tastes so much better over there?
Do we have any answers to why?
Yeah, did you find any insight?
No.
Well, it's I mean, going back to what Lionel Vatanet of La Farm said, and he's right, and it's why everything there is all good bread, is it's the natural fermentation there, and like it's their yeast, for one, that's natural in France, and it's their non-GMO wheat, all their corn and everything they have. It's just really good raw material, and so everybody.
There's no non-GMO in France. Everything is non-GMO. It's just they don't use genetically modified anything.
Yeah, which that's a good and a bad thing. And I say it a bad thing. Obviously, most people are like, how is it a bad thing? As Americans, we're so used to seeing pretty food and like pretty everything, like raw material. And we were saying this, like we'd go to markets, and because we were staying in Airbnbs and we had kids, we didn't eat out every single meal. In fact, the idea of the trip was to just have normal life just in France. And so we were just like, let's just live as French people, but still be the Trujillos and not sightsee every day, but just kind of immerse ourselves in the lifestyle. And so we would just go to markets, and that was really one of the most fun times because we cooked a lot. And I feel like I stepped up my cooking game while I was there, and like it just makes you want to do better when you have all this great raw material. But you go to a market and there's just like flies everywhere.
Yeah.
Inside what we would consider like a Whole Foods. It's just like flies all over. All the produce is dirty, like nothing's washed. It's just like that. They literally just pull it out of the dirt.
Are you talking about in Paris specifically? Or you're talking about
France.
all over?
Yeah, because even like when we were in the Dordogne, when we were at Sarlat, we went into like a big grocery store type of place, and
Supermarché.
pretty much like
it was a Carrefour.
I guess things didn't look as sexy as they look here. Like, but the product, like the zucchini you buy or the carrots you buy, are a million times better. They just taste so good. And all we were doing is little light salt, little olive oil on something, a little heat, and it was just perfect. Like the best asparagus we've ever had was one that I just made while we were in Beaune in a kitchen. We just cooked it up, and it was just ridiculous.
Yeah. So you're cooking a lot at home. Were you shopping in supermarkets, or would you go to like their equivalent of the farmers markets more often? And what were those like? And again, what were the like? Trying to compare it to, because you were experiencing life as a French person or as a family traveling through France, what were the major differences that made you think, oh, we don't have that in America, or we don't do that in America?
Well, as far as shopping for food, it was a little bit of both. A little bit of the major grocery stores and a little bit of the farmers market.
And at those places, did you like? Was there like specific produce that you're like, oh, we don't see in the States, or were they more knowledgeable, or
it's
or condescending?
Funny because there's definitely we have the perspective of coming from California.
Yeah.
If you go to the grocery store in California, it's just everything, and that was an adjustment when we moved to North Carolina, and I'd walk into a grocery store and the produce section was like an eighth of the size, and I've since become used to that and understand why. So their produce departments and the grocery stores are small, and a lot of it's local produce, but they still are importing some produce, and some of it's coming as far as from South America.
we noticed
the
things
Middle
like avocados were from Chile. And
Yeah.
In a way, like you were seeing things that you would see here.
Yeah.
Locally. We're like, oh, that came all the way from there, or we I think there was,
But there still wasn't a lot of diversity, and so you are forced to cook with the season, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I mean, we had asparagus like every day.
Yeah. It's like you don't have to think we should be seasonal
Right. Yeah.
here. You
Or
just
what's
kinda
seasonal,
have
what
to.
will go together.
Right.
It's pretty much, and if it's a tropical or something, it's not a locally sourced.
I also remembered in shopping in the supermarkets there that something where we do as Americans for convenience, such as like peeled and cut carrots.
I think we picked up a bag. I picked up a bag.
You
for the
can pick
kids,
up a bag, but you notice in a Harris Teeter, for example, they're in bulk, right?
Yeah, and there's
bags
5
and
different
bags,
brands,
and there's 5
yeah.
different brands, and they can be cut different ways, you might find a couple of bags like that, but it's like, no, peel your own damn carrots, and watch them there. They don't have that convenience there. I know we got to get to a quick break here.
When it comes to vodka, it starts at the farm. Social House Vodka sources corn locally from a farmer who plants non-GMO corn. And because it's made from corn, it's also gluten-free. Social House Vodka comes from Kinston, North Carolina, and sources water from the ancient Black Creek Aquifer. Social House Vodka. Live socially, enjoy responsibly.
All right, back talking about locally sourced vodka. Important for it to back to France. So let's get back in the itinerary for a sec. So any other standouts of Paris before we move on? I know you went to Chablis after that.
So we bookended the trip with Paris because that's where we flew out of as well.
Okay.
So at the very end of the trip, we were back in Paris, and
don't leave us in suspense. Please tell us now.
Yeah, I'll tell you now. Former guest of the show, Cappy Pete, via social media said, and for those that don't know, she runs all of Ashley Christensen's beverage programs. She had given us advice to go to Willie's Wine Bar, which is in Paris, and we're like, yeah, well, if she knows her shit, so let's take her advice. Randomly, we ended up, Felicia, through the power of social media, had asked if anyone out here in the States knew anyone in France that perhaps has a teenage daughter or somebody that would babysit, because it was our last night. This was like 2 or 3 days before the end of our trip. Leading up to the last night before we left in Paris, we wanted to have a date and go without the kids, and I think we earned it after
24 nights. Yeah.
Yeah. And lo and behold, the craziest thing, our neighbor across the street here in Raleigh, his cousin through marriage's best friend's daughter, doesn't even matter if you can follow it, it's just
Cousin through marriage, best friend's daughter,
went to Millbrook High School here in Raleigh.
Oh, wow.
And now her family, like her dad's business took them to France, and she's been living there for a year. And she came over. She was like a 16-year-old girl. She came over. She was adorable and nice and sweet, and obviously like spoke English. And so she took care of our girls for one night, and that was really cool. It allowed us to go out on the town, and we went to Willie's Wine Bar that Cappy told us about. The food and wine was awesome. We had a 2005 Crozes Hermitage, a really nice bottle, and I mean, wasn't terribly expensive. But that night, we went to a bar. What was it called? Bar by Nico?
Da Nico.
Yeah, Da Nico. They were pushing the envelope. I think I was telling you a little bit last night. And we went there for cocktails in the beginning, had this great meal at Willie's, and then went back to the same bar because it was so outstanding for digestif. And we walked in, guys like, let's do absinthe. And so he just bust out all this absinthe. We did the whole rigmarole with like the ice and the drips over the sugar cubes. And we tried local absinthe there. We tried like a bigger house, all these different styles. And, after all the wine and the pre-cocktails and then that absinthe, we were feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I bet.
But that was very...
Is the absinthe different over there? Because you can use wormwood, right?
Yeah, I think you can now here. It's now legal. We can... Americans...
Right.
But for the longest time, you couldn't because they potentially said that it could be considered hallucinogenic.
Yeah.
Because wormwood has a hallucinogen property in it. And but that's all kind of been demystified now, so you can buy anything. But there was a time when you couldn't, and the only thing you could get would be like Pernod or Richard, and that's why Pernod Richard is like such a big distributor out in the United States, and the pastis that's out there. And then that takes us to when we were in the south of France in like the Dordogne, pastis is what everyone drinks at the end of a meal, and so we drank a lot of that, and that was really good. That for people that don't know is kind of like an absinthe, like licorice, black licorice type of flavor, but pretty strong too. I mean, it's like 45% alcohol, so it's 90 proof.
Is it that much pastis? I mean, I think that obviously...
Well, they dilute it usually.
Yeah, you usually add water or ice cubes, something like that. But, I mean, obviously there's many different pastis out there. Pernod Ricard is like obviously the best, or Pernod is the best known internationally.
But they're like the generic version.
Exactly, yeah. So that's a cool difference because in the States, if you're going out for a nice meal, like you might... If you're really doing it up and like painting the town, you'll do maybe like a craft cocktail in the beginning, have some wine with the meal, and then after you'll finish with like brandy or cognac, which I feel like that we got adopted from the French or the Spanish, or maybe in Italy you would have grappa.
Yeah.
But now they're like, oh yeah, in the south of France they have pastis. But you were saying this bar happened in Paris.
That was in Paris, but they were doing everything.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, we had the liqueur de noix, which is walnut liqueur. And
that was incredible.
Yeah.
We brought a bottle back home, and that is tremendous. I mean, you'd think like, I don't know, is this going to be good? And it's walnuts. It's almost like maybe orgeat, like an almond paste or syrup.
So yeah, that's another thing that I feel like Americans, we really obviously there's the Cipriani and Harry's made the Bellini and stuff like that, but we really changed the game of cocktails and like pre-prohibition cocktails, and I don't think it was so socially widely, I don't want to say accepted, but in practice to make all these high-end many ingredient cocktails.
Well, we had that conversation with our bartender at Danico, and we were talking about how they were doing cocktails and how it wasn't very common in France to do that. And also the conversation evolved into cuisine as well, because we kind of felt throughout our travels, we were gravitating towards restaurants that weren't French restaurants, and even the nicer restaurants we went to, the Michelin restaurants, they weren't specifically doing French cuisine. And so we had this conversation, he said, and we were kind of in agreement that the French have been cooking a certain way for a very long time, and just now are they evolving and adapting to new techniques and new flavors.
He said it was a common belief that the French basically were coasting on
their history,
history, and that they weren't
resting on their laurels.
Yeah, and they weren't pushing the envelope, so to speak. Now, take that all aside from any high-end like Michelin star, chef that's out there, of course.
The milieu, if you will.
Exactly. But that could also be said for any great chef in any part of the world, that they're always pushing themselves. But the consensus of just general cuisine at any, everyday local place was just like, this is a croque monsieur.
Yeah.
This is a
you
niçoise.
have, 5 boulangeries all next to each other, all serving the same 3 sandwiches.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
So
but that's
tell
what
the people what a croque monsieur is for those who might have not been to France.
It's just bread,
it's a grilled cheese sandwich,
cheese, and ham.
Yeah.
And then
a
croque madame is with ham, and I think a croque monsieur is without ham.
No, they both have ham. One has an egg.
Yeah.
That's right, and there's an egg in it.
Yeah.
It's a really heavy...
but yes, you will find that in every boulangerie.
Yeah, and you cannot
France.
eat... I mean, Charlotte could eat that every day, minus the ham. But, I had one on the trip, and that was enough for me.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings me to my question. So, like, in America, on pretty much almost every menu restaurant, you're going to find, let's say, chicken. They're grown, hugely, and probably beef. So, 2 things. Like, what is France's chicken? Like, what do you see all over? Duck, right? Okay.
Duck is a big deal out there.
Yeah. And you see it in many different ways.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. People always hear duck confit. Duck confit. That's duck cooked in its own fat.
Right.
It's duck cone fat. That when we were in Dordogne, that's the birthplace, or that's the haven for foie gras. And it's typically in that area is duck foie gras. There was some geese or some goose foie gras, but primarily duck and canard as it's pronounced. And that, I could eat that all day long. And in fact, we got a great recipe. This is a fun thing that somebody verbally told us while we were in a grocery store in Sarlat. I overheard some English being spoken, and they were looking at a bunch of beef at this market. And so me being the North Carolinian and just the American, I'm like, you guys barbecuing? They're like, yeah, we're thinking of barbecuing some beef, but I don't know. And I was like, how are you going to do it? What are you doing? And they're like, well, maybe we're just going to put it on the grill and on the stove. I'm like, that's not barbecue.
Yeah.
That's not even grilling. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And then I said, do you have an outside anything yet, coals yet, whatever? So we talked through that for a while, and then I realized I was speaking to an American, and he said, oh yeah, I camped out here 30 years ago with my then wife, and I met this couple who I think they were German. And so 30 years later, they decided to all go back and go to the place, minus the wife.
I see.
So this American, he travels a lot, and he's been out there, and he said, well, I have some advice, because I've come to this area all the time. Here's a little menu that's very common to the area. Take potatoes, slice them as thin as possible, raw, dry them out with paper towels or so, just get them all nice and dry. Buy a can of cooked duck breasts and legs, and they come in their own fat.
Yeah.
They all confit, and out there you can just buy cans of duck.
Yeah.
Everywhere. It's just totally common. So he's like, here, and he showed me a big can. He's like, there you go, take this. Open the can up, pour it all over all the meat and the fat. Pour it all over the potatoes inside like a casserole dish. And that's it. And he's like, you can put some herbs in there if you like. So I had some herb de Provence because we were in Provence. I put that in there. I unfortunately put salt in the dish too, which is not needed because duck fat is super salty. So my dish was a little saltier than we probably would have wanted. But the texture, the flavor was fucking believable. It was so good. Put it in the oven. I just let it go for, 2 hours, 3 hours. Took it out, and it was like almost like a potato gratin.
Yeah.
But without
with
cheese. It was just duck fat.
So what are you going to do to replicate that here? Because I don't think you can get those like...
you can get duck fat at Whole Foods.
And when we flew back and we were in the States, we stayed at a family member's house out in Bethesda, Maryland, because we flew out of Dulles and Washington. And I told them about this recipe, so we recreated it and did it in DC.
Yeah.
And it
was undersalted?
It was undersalted. So sometime I'll do it.
Maybe it's like 1.5 pinches of salt instead of 2 pinches of salt.
Use
like
some salt. Just don't use all the salt like I did the first time.
Yeah.
But
that's cool. So that's a great tip and a great thing that people can easily do, and something you brought back from France. So that was another one of my questions is, what did you guys see or do? So we have this dish. Maybe there's another example that you will now permanently incorporate into your daily life as far as either your diet or the time you eat or a snack or anything like that.
One thing that I know that I'll start doing a lot more often is buying baguettes. Like, even though the baguettes here are not as fantastic as the ones in France.
We thank goodness have Lionel Batanet. So
and he's opening new shops all over the place.
Yeah.
We just saw a new one coming out here in North Raleigh. And so if I'm going to buy some bread, I'll probably buy it from him. But I like just making sandwiches on baguettes as opposed to our sliced bread. I think I like it because so many times we would just buy a baguette. We knew we were going to be on the road that day. Or checking out whatever castles or something like that. So in the morning, I would just take a huge piece of baguette, throw butter and cheese and meats in there, and then slice them, but then wrap them in foil and throw them in my backpack. And we had those. You could have them whenever you want, and they were perfect on the road.
And you get them fresh every day, and they'll last about 2 days. And after 2 days, they get a little crusty.
Yeah, that's the only problem with baguettes is after a day.
Yeah. So you buy them when you know you're going to make them.
Yeah.
But I will definitely and always and just the sandwich satisfaction on a baguette I think is far superior than just thinly sliced sourdough or something.
Totally.
I don't think I would not change my eating habits, but I now have a greater appreciation for our eating habits.
Okay.
I realize how much we as Americans really do eat throughout the day when you compare to what you presume the French are eating when they're having,
Yeah, I was going to say that you were going to say that, or you made some post about like, I'm already, I've already gained 6 pounds. Like, I don't see any extra weight on you guys.
I don't think I
did you guys really eat or what?
No.
You said something, I thought like, I'm already, put on 18 pounds or something
can't remember.
like that.
She actually didn't gain a pound.
I lost one.
Yeah, she lost weight.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, well, my eating routine here at home is I wake up and have something small, and then I'll usually work out and then come back and have second breakfast, but like eggs and protein. and then have lunch, and then have an afternoon snack, and then have dinner.
Yeah.
But
She's always eating.
I am always eating, but I eat pretty healthy. I try and be very conscious about what I'm eating because we do dine out a lot and drink a lot. So I try and find that balance. But staying in the Airbnbs was awesome because we had control over what we were eating, when we were eating, what we were feeding the kids, and also managing cost, right? Because when you're staying in a hotel, you're spending $60 for breakfast or family four. That's literally croissants, coffee, and if you're lucky, a hard-boiled egg.
There might be some jam in there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so minimal and sweet, and I don't particularly like sweet breakfast. So if we weren't at an Airbnb or hadn't yet gone to the store, we were so hungry and then rushing out to get breakfast, but got a late start, so we missed the hours of the boulangerie or the patisserie, and then had to wait for lunch, and then then you're just hungry and you're ordering anything. Same thing for the afternoon. If you miss lunch and it's 2:00 and you're hungry and the kids are hungry, a lot of the grocery stores, unless you go to the major grocery stores, all the markets are closed, the restaurants are closed until 6, 7. So you really do have to plan ahead. But even their lunches, it's these baguettes. And so
Felicia kept saying, what is with the French? They don't eat anything.
I know.
Everything's so small. Like, they just have like 4 snacks.
It is definitely smaller portions for sure.
Yeah. And the coffee, you have the little cups of espresso in every Airbnb. We'd make like 2 of them in the morning.
Yeah.
And then we come home, and we're in America, and we're having like 16 ounces of coffee with 8 ounces of milk in it, like we're drinking right now.
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, I had a fresh appreciation for the accessibility of food of all different kind, anywhere, anytime here, and different cuisines, and the diversity and the options for lunch. Like, you can go to the salad, you can go to sandwiches, you can have a full, like, Chinese meal at any time, anywhere. And I like having those options.
Yeah.
I really do.
So I think that 2 things here I want to touch on. Coffee. Because you go there, and my experience, especially in Paris, but you go anywhere and you just say, hey, can I have a cup of coffee? And what do they serve you? They serve you a shot of espresso that is made the most perfect way. Like, the cream is perfect on top and everything.
The crema.
Yeah. And you don't get any milk or anything. You just drink it black like that because it's already, like, naturally creamy. At least, I think that's my experience.
Yeah, you're right.
But it is, like, it is so perfectly balanced. Like, it's chocolatey and nutty and not bitter, and it's amazing. And like, you feel really good. And it's so different because, in America, we make this crappy watered down coffee, I feel like. And I always thought to myself, like, especially being in the wine business, that we have all these Italians and French people come over here and they go to Starbucks and like, how do you guys even drink that after? Because like everything from Starbucks to me tastes bitter and heavy chicory. Or I don't think they use actual chicory, but I have that feeling that they do in it.
Yeah, and we have to buy the little espresso machines that they had. Like, they're not expensive. They're just these little tiny...
The Nespresso machine?
Yeah.
They're delicious, man.
Yeah, those are fantastic.
But so wasteful. Those little pods. They cannot be good for the environment, all those little pods.
Yeah, they're like Keurig.
You're probably right about that.
Keurigs are the worst, by the way. They talk about waste and
the coffee just doesn't taste good. I have to say, I don't think they're going to be a sponsor of the show, but Nespresso, I would definitely take an espresso machine. Those things are expensive, but worth it.
Yeah. So we're up against our next commercial coming up, but I want to tease a little bit, and it's I want to talk about hospitality when we return.
This segment is brought to you by the Triangle Wine Company. Visit Triangle Wine Company stores in Morrisville, Cary, and Southern Pines, North Carolina. Or order your wine and beer online at trianglewineco.com. And be sure to use our promo code NCFB to receive 10% off your purchases. Triangle Wine Company.
The service in France is not good. And if you're at a fine dining restaurant, at a Michelin star restaurant, we went to a few, the service was fine. It was pretty good. But if you're just dining out at a casual place, it's next to non-existent. And I would argue, and I take then a lot of pride in where we are in North Carolina and this embodiment of like entrepreneurship and small business, individualized businesses, where if you go to a Crawford & Son or any of Ashley's restaurants, I think we actually made the point that Pools would be a 2 Michelin star restaurant if it was in San Francisco. Like if you just picked it up and put it over there with the service and the food and all the design, it's just a great place. And we get overlooked a little bit because we are in a smaller market. But with that, we compensate by trying even harder. And I think the service out here, whereas we've panned it before, like, I don't know if we have good service in this small town. I would argue that you go to any restaurant in this area, they're refilling your glass. They're taking away garbage. They have a smile on their face. They're happy to be there for the most part.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at people like, could we get more water? Can we get another bottle of wine? Can we get the check? Like, well, granted, like, that's a cultural thing. They don't give you the check until you ask for it.
L'édition, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, l'édition. So that's actually kind of cool, too, because then you don't feel like you're ever being kicked out.
Yeah.
They just bring you the bill, like, halfway through your meal.
But it is, once they've brought you your food and your drink, they're done.
Right.
They don't come back on you. Like, you got to go
They're not trying to sell you dessert drinks or anything like that.
Yeah.
No, and they're not checking it on you, which I think is a really lovely part of the hospitality dining experience. Like, do you need anything? Can I help you? You know.
So this goes to one of the hugest differences social mores, and is actually a hot button issue in the restaurant and hospitality world now, with Danny Meyer, of course, eliminating tipping. That it's a profession seen over in Europe, that you are a waiter or you are in the hospitality business, and typically tipping is not. It doesn't happen.
It's not a common
occurrence.
Yeah.
You might leave a couple of coins or after just to say thank you, if you have pocket change or whatever, but it's very much like it's just a job. It's what I do. And, so many of you who have 9 to 5 office jobs, you're probably not being very nice to the common people you work with, or maybe you're just not even thinking about on a hospitality sense, even though the waiters are hospitality.
Yeah, because that position,
I think that has a lot to do with it. And so that really, I haven't really given it much thought, my own sense, into this whole Danny Meyer thing and non-tipping movement that's going on, but I would imagine that that's a huge thing in France for the reason.
I made that observation when we were in
Le Beau.
Yeah, Le Beau. We ate at a fine restaurant. The service was fine, but I realized, I was like, these places are small. Most of the people that own these restaurants are the ones working in them. They don't really hire employees unless it's big enough to have more than 1 or 2 people. And this was a big place, so they had employees. It was a larger place, but like, you get there and you work all day. Like, it's not, there aren't shifts, and servers don't roll in like a 4-hour shift and then they peace out for lunch. It's like, no, you do lunch, and then you might have that 2 or 3 hour gap like we all do in restaurants, but then they come back and then they finish the night shift there as well. But I thought about it, and the markets, like I should say, like the retail stores, like clothing stores or cheese shops or anything, run the same schedule, the same hours. So the jobs are almost identical. Like, working retail or working service is the same job. Like, they're probably making 15 to 20 euro an hour, and they're not getting tipped. They're not whatever, but it's a job. It's a job like anything.
Exactly.
And so you don't have maybe the same expectations of, if I do really good, I'm going to make more money here.
Right.
And so maybe, I don't know, I'm going to say, like, maybe we're doing it right. Maybe for the end user, that, like, if the expectation is that you're going to make a little bit more money, wouldn't we all feel okay giving an extra $5 or $6 on top of something if we knew that everything was going to go perfectly?
I mean, absolutely. I think so. I mean, it makes sense to me, but I'm also obviously American-centric, growing up here and seeing what it does, and also working in restaurants. But, like, also, I think that there could be a much fairer way of distributing the wealth in terms of having the back of the house probably split of it, because, as we know, back of the house, cooks, server, dishwashers, chefs, etc., don't see that tipping, and then it creates a lot of divide, and also economic divide, because it's higher to hire talent for the back of the house. Having said that, yeah, I think there's something to be said for incentivizing people to have a good service.
Well, and then there's the rating, like, we've had these conversations about Yelps and rating and all that stuff.
Sure.
Now, when we talk about Airbnbs compared to hotels, our Airbnb experiences were exceptional. The hospitality was exceptional compared to the hotel experiences, which were very lackluster, one of which we paid for, and we removed ourselves from the hotel. Anyway, we just didn't want to be there.
We got out of it.
But anyway, so
look at that. I mean, Airbnbs, you're incentivized, right?
By the rating, because you want people to come and stay there.
Totally.
And,
it's a check and balance system.
Really, really nice, because in selecting the Airbnbs, we read the reviews and, how many stars and the feedback. And that was helpful in making our choices. And then when we went there, we had these great experiences, and some more exceptional than others, but across the board, it was awesome because, there's not a tipping, but then there's the review.
Yep.
But the food scene, the food culture doesn't seem to be the same. It's not like, social media management seems to be the thing, and Instagramming, and some of them didn't have Instagram accounts, some of the restaurants. And, going back to like the same boulangerie, there's, 5 in a row serving the same thing. Like,
how do they
differentiate themselves?
That's a great question. I wonder how they do. How do they all survive,
I don't even think,
too?
Yeah, the food scene is just, it's very, very different than it is here from a social connectivity standpoint.
Obviously in our worlds, everything revolves around food and beverage.
Right.
The people we know, the friends we have, the parties we go to. And so I'm wondering if you had met people that are in the food and service industry, if it would have been different, but that's an interesting observation. So that brings me to my next question. Did you guys, I know you had some meetings with some wine people, did you ever eat in somebody's home while you were through France? Or?
Well, one thing that was my favorite part of the experience was when we were in the Dordogne, we stayed at this farmhouse that was steps away from a medieval castle.
You keep saying Dordogne, but you're outside of Bordeaux, basically.
Yeah. So the region is Dordogne.
Yeah.
It's the Dordogne River, and there are
the
many
Dordogne
little
River.
small villages.
And there's small villages, yeah.
What village were you in?
We were in Baynac.
Okay.
It's Beynac.
Okay.
And
how far from did you go into Bordeaux at all?
No, but it's about maybe
it's
like
a
an
few
hour
hours
south.
from Bordeaux.
What are your favorite experiences?
So we're staying at this farmhouse, and it was so lovely. The farmhouse itself was hundreds of years old, but inside was totally contemporary, modern kitchen. And our host actually lived in the house but below, so she had separate entrance and stuff, but she was lovely. She had just put a pool in. She didn't speak a lick of English. We didn't really speak much French, but we still managed to communicate really well through hand gestures and stuff. But she was so sweet and lovely. And one day I heard her working out in the garden. I opened the door later that day, and she had left some zucchini on our doorstep. So we took it upon ourselves to then go to the farmer's market and get some additional ingredients and make a meal.
We made a ratatouille.
Yeah. with the squash, and
Did
then
you drink it with 61 Latour?
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
but that was such a I loved that she gifted us something that she grew in her garden. We cooked something, and then we also made some for her and left it for her, and then she gave us some more zucchini. I think she was just like, there's a lot of zucchini.
Or make that for me again.
Yeah.
I really
I'm lousy with zucchini.
But what was really cool is our next Airbnb, the next location we went to, the host was a restaurateur, and we had never had the opportunity to use the zucchini again. So we left it for him, and then he sent a message saying, thank you so much. I used it. I made a recipe at lunch.
Oh, nice.
So we kind of passed along the zucchini. But I really enjoyed that whole experience.
But so you didn't actually have a meal in somebody's home at some point? Okay.
No.
Did you guys happen to eat at McDonald's or any fast food while you were there?
We did.
Yeah.
One time.
Okay.
It was not good. It was not good.
So the beef is different.
Yeah.
There's a different flavor. There's a different taste.
Yeah, and that's I think what this trip in a way did for me, it actually made me really respect the things that we have in the United States and the basic comforts of what we consider home and maybe take for granted. Because not everything is better in France. And to be honest, the States, we do it well in a lot of ways. So I'm going to be pro-American right now, which sometimes tends to be not a popular thing. But the beef in France is atrocious. It's yes, it's non-GMO and all that. But I made the point that going back to when I worked at Standard Foods, we never bought GMO anything. And we sold all grass-fed beef and all that, but our beef was delicious. And you can find, if you go to Whole Foods or whatever, a good market, you can find really good beef that is cultivated the right way. And even a little grain in their diet is not bad for a cow. But the beef in France is chewy and brown and mealy.
There's no flavor. The textures are different.
Yeah, so by virtue of that, steak isn't really a major consumable product out there. It's definitely, I think pork is their main product, when it comes to bigger meats and all, and and then lamb, things like that, and going back to duck. But even that, North Carolina pigs, North Carolina heritage swine, this is the best pork in the world.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, and thanks to Steve Mangano's party last night, where Eric Montagny, former chef of Standard Foods, did a whole hog last night, and it was tremendous. the food in the States and the food in North Carolina, I'd argue, might be some of the best food in the world when it comes to the raw materials.
Yeah, the raw materials, yeah.
Well,
we have a horn of plenty, let's say.
Well, and one thing that we figured out, because as we were traveling and gravitating towards restaurants, we were going to Italian restaurants, we were going to Asian restaurants, Middle Eastern restaurants, and we realized it's because of the acid and the spice. We're so used to having an acid component in our dish or spicy component.
Yeah.
And French food is not very acidic and certainly not spicy. It is a lot of creams and more, neutral flavors.
Lots of butter.
Yeah.
Well, the old joke is, how do you tell the difference between an Italian chef and a French chef? One has butter, one has olive oil. It's
okay.
and then the only difference, But anyway.
Yeah, so that's why our palates just kind of craved that and wanted that. But also, too, the French, especially in Lyon, but kind of a little bit everywhere, do have an affinity for Asian foods and Asian cultures, like ramen, Vietnamese food, sushi.
The Vietnamese food in Provence was amazing. The ramen in Lyon was amazing. And the Indian food in Tours, Loire, was some of the best Indian food I've ever had in my life. It was unbelievable.
And the gyro in Paris, Mediterranean food. So yes, I know. I saw your Facebook post like, "Wait, you're in France and you're in Lyon and you're eating ramen."
Yeah.
But our bodies craved it.
Yeah.
And let's be honest. So Lyon is like the culinary capital of the world.
Yeah.
If you are bold enough to open up a restaurant there, you better hell be awesome.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to let some lousy ramen place exist. It will go away basically by pure capitalism and all that. No one will shop there because it sucks. So if it's there, it's good.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had a tough time finding bad food in Lyon. Like everything was delicious there.
Before we end, that was one of my main things. I wanted to hear more about Lyon.
Oh, talk about the ice cream you had in Lyon.
Oh my God, the black sesame ice cream. So, I mean, it was just so good. And I posted on Instagram, one of my friends said, it looks like cement. It certainly didn't taste like cement. It wasn't sweet. And I think the ice cream across the board is not as sweet, not as sweet. And it was so good. I had a lot, all the ice cream I had, walnut, pistachio, and the black sesame, so nut-based. But they were just so good and rich and creamy and flavorful without being overwhelming or artificial tasting.
Yeah, like light on the palate to where you could have an ice cream all the time.
I don't eat ice cream that often.
That
I did all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe because we were walking so much.
Yeah, I'm assuming they probably don't add sugar like we do there,
not.
And processed sugar is probably like more natural sugars they're using.
The flavors were lovely. Yeah, that ice cream, it was a charcoal gray color, but the flavor was it was really nice.
Nice. Cool. So that's the thing about Lyon. Your body's craving. Did you eat at any traditional bistro lyonnaise?
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, we ate at Prairial.
Oh yeah.
So Prairial is
that wasn't a traditional French bistro though.
It's a Michelin star restaurant, and just a tip, like pro tip for traveling with kids. And Felicia came up with this good idea. Our kids are really good, and they stay up late and they hang. They can dine. So we're blessed to have good kids. There's that blessed word again. But we dined at a Michelin star restaurant for lunch, and kind of two things. One, it's a little less expensive when you eat at lunch, and the chef is not taking his time off. He's still making as good a food as he would have made at dinner. And two, it's the middle of the day, so you don't have to keep your kids up super late if you want to dine there. We ate at this place, Prairial, which was downtown Lyon, and it was...
Was it in the old... It's in the old part of the city?
It was in the new part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Across the bridge. So we stayed in Old Town, Old Town, and then we went across the bridge to the newer part to dine, and it was
so
phenomenal.
Lovely.
They made raviolis where they put flavors. I have it written down.
So Prairial is a term used for the third month of spring.
Okay.
And we were there perfect timing too, because we were there in June, the end of spring.
I wrote down the exact menu. You have to just hear. This is what we ate. First dish, radish with butter and crisps. Second dish, puffed corn. These are just like little amuses they put in. Then we had a yellow zucchini soup with an herbed ice cream. Then a white and green asparagus with salt and crab. Next was ravioli de jardin consommé carrots. It was a carrot consommé, and it was raviolis of their garden. There were 3 raviolis in the dish. One was a beetroot and geranium ravioli. The next was carrot and rosemary, and the last was celery and hazelnut. These flavors were unbelievable. Felicia had the whitefish with peas and cream, like some yogurt cream and geraniums. I had duck with rhubarb, celery, a dussel of cherries, and then the dessert was a multiple expression of chocolate, French Alp cheese, chocolate yuzu ice cream, all this on the chocolate plate, and we had wine to pair. We were in Northern Rhone. It was Lyon, so I did it was like a Marsan-Roussan field blend, and then he was just giving us like little tastes of things as well. But that was tremendous.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably was the best meal we had. I mean, it wasn't like it was a fancy place, so yes, it better be damn good. But it was
meaning you were expected to have a good meal. Yeah,
but
we've done that.
Sounds a little bit Blue Hill at Stone Barns ish.
Yeah, I mean, it was
like
so fresh.
In their garden.
Yeah. But I mean, it was awesome. I think if you can do it, get to France, man.
It sounds awesome. It sounds like you guys had a great experience, but it also kind of sounds like you're enjoying the comforts of being back home, and it I guess it in a way it did make you appreciate our country as well.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of both. I want to continue traveling, but I think it helps you have a better perspective and appreciate the things you have at home as well.
I'll just finish with this. I think I've told this story before, but it was so hot in the Côte Chalonnaise that we went to McDonald's only because they had frozen yogurt and air conditioning, which we did not have in the place we were staying at.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you guys for sharing your story. I hope everybody else enjoys. Go to France, and you will eat and drink very merrily.
Guests of the NCF&B podcast receive a swag bag, including gifts from these exceptional North Carolina producers: Social House Vodka, Hungry Harvest, Alley 26 Tonic Syrup, Michael's English Muffins, Larry's Beans and 42 in Lawrence, Ramona Wine Coolers, and Happy Hour Vitamins. Thanks for listening to the NCF&B podcast. I am the voice, Brian Hoyle. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.